I would argue shame is one of the strongest emotions and feelings that someone can feel. And not just in the feeling of how someone is affected by shame, also in how it drives people to do things that they normally wouldn't do, to think of things that they normally wouldn't think of if they were in a non shamed and more logical state of mind. I think a couple of examples, there are quite a few examples I'm sure anybody can think of, where people have done actions that are deviant from what they would normally do because of a fear of shame. Because, and usually this is social shame. Almost always it's social shame, because shame is a social construct. Shame is feeling like other people's opinions of you are going to be altered in a negative view because of actions that you do. And it's going to affect the relationships that you have with other people because of the actions that you do. And since humans are such social creatures, I believe, I think most people believe, we all want to have friends. And if we do actions that affect these friendships, whether it be through earned friendships that you develop yourself or ones that are connected by blood through your family, these are always things that we want to maintain and not be affected. So, what are two examples? Why did I make this particular episode and why do I want to talk about it? Well, there were two recent examples that came up, and they were both related with school and academic shame. And they both were related with the idea of not completing your college degree, either at all or in time or in the specified time period that you had originally said to everybody. One of these ideas of shame is more connected with the idea of straight up. Actually, both of them are connected with the idea of straight up failure. So I had a friend who will be unnamed, but they were set on graduating early. However, to complete their degree, they had to complete basically this one last class that they were taking. And the trouble was, the class was quite difficult, and it didn't seem like at the time coming up onto the end of the semester that they would be able to achieve a passing grade to that class. And this would just throw all of their plans into great disarray. Reason being, this class was required for graduation, which meant if they didn't actually pass for the class, then they wouldn't be able to graduate. And this was a very unideal and quite catastrophic situation for this person because they were graduating early. And it wasn't just graduating early and then being able to take that semester that you recoup and just doing nothing in that semester. No, they were planning on graduating early and then starting to enter the workforce early as well, which meant there were already imminent and important plans in place that would prevent this kind of where not being able to graduate early would really affect it in a profoundly negative way. So, passing the class was absolutely necessary. Failing was really just an awful circumstance, right? It would just throw all of their plans into a very chaotic state, which is something that everybody wants to avoid. However, it wasn't all doom and gloom, since their situation, it was salvageable even if they did not pass, right? It would have been much more difficult, but there were still replacement classes that they could probably have taken online in the next semester, and it would have been more difficult, but I believed in their ability to juggle these responsibilities, being able to work a full time job, but also maybe work on whatever class that they had to do as a replacement on in their free time outside of the working hours. And this was a viable solution if they had actually failed this class and they would have to basically not graduate early and actually graduate on time. So, despite the situation, right? If you think about it logically, it's not the end of the world. It certainly sucks. It's a awful situation to be put yourself into, both financially. First of all, main reason I would say that they wanted to graduate more early was, it saves money. You don't have to pay for another extra semester of college and university, higher education in general. If you don't have substantial financial aid, which a lot of people don't, college is expensive and they don't want to incur that kind of cost. So having to not be able to graduate early, instead take that extra semester just to make up for the failures in their previous semester, they want to avoid that because of the financial cost. Another one would just be, first of all, it would make their life more stressful if they had to actually continue on and take classes remotely, because then they'd have to, as I said, juggle responsibilities between work life and academic life, which is already a tall task. It's very tough for students to be able to do that, and I really sincerely applaud people, especially people that work long hours in quite arduous jobs where it's quite hard to double task and you have to spend and allocate large portions of your time just devoted to your work. And with those kinds of jobs, it's quite hard to balance the academic and the work. And that's just more stressful. And stress, while it pushes us and allows us to be quite good and expand our capabilities, improve our skills, a lot of good things that come with stress, but a lot of bad things come with stress as well. Very double edged. And more often than not, we think of the negatives. That is what affects our psyche and how we interpret stress. And the bad ones are quite high as well. Having a poor balance, being more anxious the entire time because you have to juggle two different sets of responsibilities instead of just one, especially with one being a entirely new playground, an entirely new environment that you might not be extremely, probably are not extremely well versed in. You have no quite experience graduating from college, probably with working a full time job, as all your previous experiences, most likely internships or part time work, is just not the same level as having a full time 40-hour a week job. So, to be able to tackle that, you'd want as much as your time focused on that instead of having to juggle two different things. So with those things in mind, there were definitely a lot of reasons why this was an extremely stressful situation, right? I think the one motivator that really tipped this person, and they basically had sort of a mental breakdown and was in a very poor mental state for quite a few days. And I think the main reason when I was talking with them that actually tipped them over the edge in this situation was actually the shame. The shame in admitting to other people that this situation had occurred, and the shame in not being able to face other people and them knowing that you are a failure. So, how did this manifest? They were afraid. There were multiple parties involved in this, shame situation that they were really afraid of happening. One of them was their parents, right? They hadn't been completely forthright and transparent with their parents about how the class was going. Since this was over a whole semester, the class was difficult, but they hadn't been giving checkpoints and up to date information with the parents about how the course was going. So when the parents would learn about this, this would be a complete surprise. And obviously, the parents perhaps bankrolling some parts of their education, this would not be really welcome news. Just be like expecting you to graduate semester early, and now out of the blue, at the end of the semester, you're just like, sorry, mom and dad, I failed. I failed this class, and now I'm gonna have to take another semester. The shame in having to tell your parents that, especially when you've been keeping them mostly in the dark throughout the semester. That is a tough situation and a tough emotion to face. Another aspect of the shame is not just with the parents, it's also with friends. You've been telling your friends the entire time that I'm planning on graduating early. I won't be seeing you guys in the next semester. It is quite one thing that was very debilitating to this person was they could not imagine facing their friends again. After telling them for multiple months on end, not even really actively telling them, but just with the situation, you sometimes have to describe, oh, I'm going to graduate early. So now it's in the minds of everybody. They're expecting this, especially since it's now nearing the end of the semester. So people are going to start saying goodbyes because they might not see this person again. And they want to make sure that everything is left on a good note. So imagine having and going through all of that situation where all your friends are saying goodbye. They're expecting you to be gone. And it's kind of like a giant, long farewell. And then you change all of that. The situation flips on its head. You come back the next semester. That is a strong emotion and strong shame to feel. Because it in a way, admits some duplicity on your part, some bad trait. Or not necessarily bad trait, but something went wrong. I think that's the easiest way to describe it. Either you were lying, and most people probably wouldn't think this because you're friends with them, so you know and have an idea of what their personality is like, and you probably wouldn't automatically think that these people are liars, right? But it could be that they're lying and that maybe they never actually planned to be graduating early and this was all a ploy of some sort. Clearly, this didn't happen, but it still implies that something bad happened. A change of plans where you were planning to graduate early and now you aren't. And the shame comes in the reasoning of why that happened. If they were forced to actually come back for another semester, you'd have to explain to these people. You can't just like show up again and be like, oh, hey guys, I'm still here again. Still here with you all on the last semester. I just said I have a change of heart. That's clearly not going to fly. It's not going to be a satisfactory reason for coming back and studying for another semester. So inevitably, you're probably going to have to say the truth at some point, which is that you failed a class. And that's where the shame comes in. It's very difficult to admit failures, especially when they are such catastrophic failures that it heavily impacts your immediate future and life plans. And that was the component of shame I think was most that the person who this story is associated with was most fearful of. It was the shame of people knowing their failures. And that is possibly what drove them to the kind of mental situation that they were in, where they were just not happy for a long period of time nearing the end of the semester when they really felt like there was no way out of the situation. They felt like no matter how hard they tried, they wouldn't be able to pass the class and they couldn't escape the situation. They'd be forced to come back at some point or another. In fact, they were already making contingency plans about how they would academically still take another semester, but they wouldn't be in person because they couldn't bear face the shame of having their friends know that they failed, and they wanted to keep it on the down low as possible. So this kind of situation, this shame, this fear of failure, the shame where if someone else knew, it would just be so debilitating. It was such a drag on their mental outlook that it really made them not want to, first of all, engage in some social activities near the end because they didn't want to let their unhappiness be visible to other people. And it just made them extremely stressed. And even if the situation was still escapable, it made them even more demotivated as they already felt like they'd failed to even embark and continue working on the actions and efforts that actually could have gotten them out of the situation. I want to give another example, another story that I heard. And this one's more of a unconfirmed one. But I had a friend who I talked to a lot. And this was more previous in my life, in middle school, high school, basically before college. And come college, I just did not talk to them nearly as much. It was like the first year we talked more and we still got together. But then basically after that first semester, it became harder and harder to get a hold of this person. Whether it be just through digital communication, talking on Discord, talking text, talking through other forms of social media, it just became much more difficult to get a hold of this person, have any kind of conversation. And I never knew why. There were always theories because this person I knew, they had some traumatic incidents happen during their past. And it really wasn't that far away, as in it happened like a couple years ago since we started college. Which meant that it made sense why they might suddenly be reclusive again for all. Perhaps they were really feeling the effects of this traumatic incident. And it just felt safer, better for them to not engage with other people who might remind them of such traumatic events. So that was the impression that I was going off of basically for a while, for around the past 2 to 3 years, not knowing why he became so reclusive. Because basically after that first semester, I only ever saw them one more time afterwards in person. There was just very little contact. And it was only until recently, like around a month ago, a few weeks ago, when I heard a rumor of what the reason was, why'd he withdrawn and why'd he become. And the reason why this story is relevant is because the rumor was this person had dropped out of college. And it had, in fact, been around that time when I stopped hearing from him. That had been around the time that they dropped out of college. So it was like after one semester, and apparently that was around the time they dropped out of college. And now suddenly everything somewhat made more sense. If I knew how difficult it was for the person in the first story to even go day by day and to even envision their life for the fear of shame, of failing, having other people know their failures, of simply just failing a class. This is just failing a class and having to take another semester to basically make up for that class and finally graduate. The shame and the fear of other people knowing your failure, and perhaps it's not even failure, right? There could be so many circumstances, so many situations, and unforeseen circumstances that cause someone to drop out of college that are oftentimes beyond one's control. But just the shame of knowing that you were on one path, looking to graduate college. Now you're no longer on there. The stigma attached with that of dropping out. I could understand why it would force someone to be so reclusive. Because it's just an awkward situation, an awkward conversation. For example, if you never actually told someone that you dropped out of college and they only know from the grapevine, kind of like how I was told. And again, this is all rumor, so I don't actually even know that this is the reason why they became so reclusive, right? But just the fact that I have this idea in my head now, I can think about it. It makes me think about these other people in a different way. And I think about how much shame he must be feeling and how devastating it must be. Shame is such a strong emotion, I feel, in motivating people to be reclusive and to avoid contact. And it's something that I've seen in like two situations now. I've seen it in my own experiences as well, interacting with sometimes friends, sometimes family, where I don't want to share results that I've had in academic endeavors, in competitions, because the shame of knowing that I didn't do well or I didn't do as well as I wanted is tough. It's hard to hear the reactions of other people. And it's hard to know that these people are going to look at me somehow differently. And really, maybe it's not positive. If they're good people, friends and families, they'll be supportive and they'll know that I gave it my best. There's always another time. And they'll support you and be like, this is not the end all be all. There's always another chance. And this is not as bad as it could be. Because you can always bounce back. You can always even take the situation. And if you cannot bounce back, you're always able to adapt it and mitigate the possible negative consequences. But it's so difficult to think that when you're the one that is feeling these negative consequences, right? It seems like the human mind is so adept at going to the worst situation, especially when we're thinking about ourselves. And that is the reason why we think about how if other people knew what just happened, they must think the worst of us. They must think we're lazy. They must think we are actually straight up just a failure and that we're irredeemable people, that they have such negative views on now that is just not even worth dealing with. And this is what motivates us, the fear of shame, to be reclusive and not want to share these results. How do we fix this? How can we overcome this fear? Well, at this moment, 12/29/2022, I don't know if I have an answer to that. Because it's something that I still struggle with. And oftentimes when I'm feeling shame of things, I don't have my answer as well as just like these other two people that I've learned consequences of. You try your best to let as little people know of your shame as much as possible. And you try and fix it yourself, but keep it on the down low. Because letting people know, that is always going to be the most difficult thing. Facing shame is one of the most difficult things someone can do. Perhaps in the future, after I have faced shamed a few more times, I'll have worked out some protocol on how to actually tackle this. But for the moment, anybody listening, just know that facing shame, everyone's feeling it. And no one really knows what they're supposed to do.